Good evening. Thank you for joining us at this Parent Community Information Session. My name is Dan Bowles, Superintendent of Schools. Also here for our discussion are Dr. Christopher Leahy, Associate Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, Don Keegan, Associate Superintendent for Business, Maintenance and Operations, and Transportation, Valerie DeFlorio, Executive Director for Pupil Personnel Services and Special Education, Greg Stone, Director of Elementary Education and ELA and Math, Lisa Goldberg, Director of Social Emotional Learning, and Jamie Sullivan, Interim Executive Principal at CNS High School. Our goal is to answer questions that people have regarding the reopening of schools. This is the second of 3 information sessions that we will be conducting within this week. The last session will be tomorrow, August 18th from 6 to 7 p.m. All of the questions and answers will be recorded and posted to our website so that people can obtain the information if they were unable to tune in to this session. As a school community, students, staff, parents, and community members, we must try to protect each other's health as we move forward with the important work of educating our children. As you will hear tonight, we will be screening staff and students daily. However, we need your help so that we can all stay healthy. There are a few fundamental things that we all need to do. We need to monitor our health and the health of our children and have them not come to school if they show any symptoms of COVID-19. Hand wash, really emphasize hand washing frequently, especially after coming into contact with anything outside of our personal space. Wear our mask everywhere. This year, we're asking our children to wear them throughout the school day, unless they are taking an approved mask break. The last thing, social distancing. Again, we are so fortunate to have a low infection rate in Onondaga County. The only way we can get back to some sense of normalcy will be to beat COVID-19. As a leader of North Syracuse Central School District, I'm confident that we'll be able to prevail. In the meantime, we will provide our children with a sound public education that is their right and our obligation. The format for tonight will be as follows. We have asked people to send in their questions in advance to a Google link that was blasted out. The purpose is to ensure providing thorough responses to your questions. I have assembled the people who will oversee the particular areas in order to properly respond to the questions that have been asked. The 4 major areas were around health and safety, instruction, special education, transportation, and social emotional learning. The first question that I have will go to Mr. Keegan, and that will be around health and safety. Mr. Keegan, how will students be protected?
Mr. Bowles, the key to protecting students is social distancing, keeping them 6 feet apart, wearing a mask and washing hands frequently, as you said moments ago. All these practices will be mandatory and closely monitored. Our staff and signage throughout the buildings will encourage these practices.
Thank you. Mr. Keegan, the next question. Will the kids need to wear masks when they are seated at their desk if they are distanced 6 feet from each other?
You know, this question has been asked frequently and there's a lot of confusion around it. So to be very clear, yes, students will have to wear masks, when they're seated at their desks, despite the fact we're doing everything possible to make sure that their classrooms are laid out in a socially distant manner. But this practice is strongly supported by the New York State guidance and the Onondaga County Department of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Keegan. This next question, how will students be receiving teacher instruction and interaction on their virtual days? Mr. Leahy?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's a question that's been posed several times. Just so for all of our parents out there, on Friday, we did upload our instructional models to the home site website. They're there for your review. I believe we sent out a message today to all parents letting them know that's there. So hybrid schedules are going to offer students synchronous or live face-to-face instruction and asynchronous instruction where learning materials are shared online for students to navigate with support or independently when appropriate. So for example, in asynchronous instruction, a teacher might post an instructional video, reading passages, activities, quizzes, or even assessments. So students are going to get both of those throughout the week, whether they're in a hybrid model or they're working remotely from home 100%. On Wednesdays, students will receive both asynchronous assignments and lessons, as well as scheduled synchronous instruction. Our teachers will also be available for office hours at specified times to support our students and give some additional feedback or support where needed. On the days students are not in school, and this has been a question that's been asked quite a few times as well, is they will receive asynchronous instruction where standards-based assignments, projects, some cases assessments may be posted for students and feedback provided at a later time. We want to make sure our students are fully engaged throughout the week. And one of the interesting things is parents are in kind of two different situations. There are parents that want the schedule that we're going to be able to provide for part of the week. And there are also parents that want some flexibility so they can work with their child after school hours, after work. So I think we have a model that's pretty strong there that hopefully can meet everyone's needs. And again, I would encourage our parents to look at those models posted on our homepage. We've laid it out K4, 5, 7, and 8 through 12. Both you'll see a sample schedule for a student coming in a hybrid model, as well as a sample schedule for a student working remotely. And they're pretty detailed. And I think that'll help our parents as they have to make a decision by Wednesday in terms of having their child enroll in remote instruction or to move forward in a hybrid model.
Thank you, Mr. Leahy. Next question. For remote or hybrid, can elementary students work at any time during the day? Or will they need to be, or I'll just have Mr. Stone answer that question.
Yep, sure. Thank you, Mr. Bowles. So, so first up, I think everyone needs to remember in the elementary level, some of the challenges that we face trying to get this off the ground is that our teachers are going to be teaching Monday and Tuesday with a cohort of students. That's about half their students. Wednesday, as we've talked about, is a day, a planning day, but it's also an instructional day of synchronous and asynchronous for all students in a hybrid model. And then Thursday and Friday, again, that teacher now has the other half of his or her students. So when we think about that, when the teacher, with the teacher and what they would have to prepare in order to meet those needs, they are teaching throughout that week, and they've got different cohorts, and that's part of it. The other part that we have to think about is, as Mr. Leahy spoke to, we have very much a split from what our parents are looking for. About half our parents are looking for a very tight schedule for the remote learners, meaning that students would log on at a specific time in order to receive instruction. And then another half of our community is really saying we need flexibility based on our jobs and our childcare situations and everything else. So for us in the schools, trying to come up with a system that's going to meet everyone's needs is a significant challenge. And so I put that out there because some of the answers that we give aren't going to be the perfect answers that everyone's looking for, because we're trying to find some middle ground to meet all of those needs. So when we're looking at a hybrid model, that 2+2 model, what that's going to look like during the day as far as the students we talked about before, students would attend school. They would go through their entire school schedule, which I'll talk about a little later this evening. While those students are in school, so half the students are in school, the other remote learners that are part of that class are going to be getting what Dr. Leahy referred to as asynchronous learning. So they're going to be getting assignments, usually through Google Classroom, that are interactive. We're really trying to build a system where teachers are giving feedback on those assignments. But keep in mind that classroom teacher is teaching a full day, and then they're also taking into account some of that asynchronous. So we have to be able to balance that in what they can actually manage. And then on Thursday and Friday, that's going to be reversed. So the other piece, the question that comes up often is that flexibility and what that's going to look like for our families that are in the remote learning only, or those Wednesdays. And we are working very hard to come up with different ways to manage that situation. It looks like very likely in the elementary, we'll be having some form of rigid schedule for our remote learners to some degree, but then we'll be having some flexibility also so that they can log in and see posted lessons. Google Classroom will be a major component of that. So we can actually post a teacher's lesson that's either pre-recorded or something that they've found that they're using as an instructional element, an instructional lesson that they find online. And then we build backwards from there. And what we're really trying to work on is to make this meaningful work for students. And that's a big challenge when you're in an online environment, especially at elementary. So we're keeping in mind the needs of our students, their age, their ability to attend to online learning and making it meaningful while balancing all those components of our community's needs and our teachers' needs. So although we don't have exact specifics on all of that, that is evolving as we go, as we get to know some of the numbers of students that are going to be attending the full virtual, we'll be able to lock down some of those things a little bit tighter, but that is an overview of what that'll look like.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Mr. Stone, the next question is also for you. Will elementary students be expected to bring their device/Chromebook back and forth or keep them home on the in-person days? What happens if they leave them at school and won't be back to school for 5 days?
Great questions. Those have come up a lot with the parent feedback we've been seeking. So, so first up, we're still making all the plans on how to make this work. And I think it's different for every age level of student. One of the most important things is our youngest learners, our kindergarten and first grade students. We can't just hand them a Chromebook and say, there you go, you're off to learning. We have to be realistic about that. So we're trying to develop plans of how we can have those Chromebooks in school for those first couple of weeks for our youngest learners who have, some of them have never even opened that technology or used a trackpad or a Google Chromebook. We have to teach them how to use them. Then on top of that, we need to teach these young students how to get into a Google Classroom, how to find their work, how to find their videos, how to navigate all of that. There's a lot that comes with that. So the priority for our youngest students will be a focus on teaching them how to use the technology, and that's going to be a major component. For our older students, and we don't know exactly what, but most likely it's going to be second grade and up or maybe third grade and up. We're working on all those right now. Those Chromebooks would be available right immediately to go home. And those students typically are very adept at logging in and being able to navigate those systems. The teachers will still be instructing what that's like in a classroom setting so that the students have a good understanding of how to navigate all that. Because when we went to remote learning in the spring, that was a major, we never had that time to teach them how to get into those systems. So we'll be building that in. As far as bringing the Chromebooks back and forth, again, our youngest students, we're going to try to keep them at home for the most part. There may be a few times where we would ask them to bring them in, but for the most part, we want those to be home. When students are face-to-face, we want them in face-to-face interaction with each other, with their peers, and with the adults. And that's going to be really important in their development. We know they're on technology a lot, so we need to maximize that face-to-face time. Our older students will probably have a little bit more opportunity to bring them back and forth, but again, the focus will be on maximizing face-to-face interaction with peers and students, as well as adults, knowing that our time is very limited and we need to make the most of it.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Our next question. At CNS, will the remote students log into class at the same time as the in-person students so that one teacher will be doing the lesson for all students simultaneously? And that is for Mrs. Sullivan.
We're still working that out. It's one thing that you have to keep in mind, just like Mr. Stone just said, the teachers are gonna all be teaching a full load. So what we know that we definitely have right now is from 2 to 2:45, teachers will have remote learning office hours where they can meet with the students that are learning remotely and they can help teach them synchronously. We will have a schedule sent out to parents for Wednesday remote learning day. We've broken it up where most of our big core areas are not overlapping so that those areas have a dedicated hour where students can work with those teachers. And again, the teachers can teach synchronously and they can also offer extra help via Zoom synchronously during those hours as well.
Thank you. The next question also, will the junior high and high school have building tours before school starts? Mrs. Sullivan?
Sure, thanks, Mr. Bowles. The junior high is actually doing building tours by appointment next week. Parents are able to call the main office. Their phone number is 315-218-3600. Again, that's 315-218-3600. And that's for eighth graders and new ninth graders. Tours will be Monday through Friday of next week, and students are also encouraged to pick up their Chromebooks during their tours. Now up at CNS, sophomores and new students can come to the building on Monday, August 31st from 10 to 6 to walk through the building and follow their schedule. We're asking that sophomores only come in with one other individual. At both schools, everyone must wear a mask and follow the proper social distancing procedures. At CNS, incoming 10th graders will be able to pick up their Chromebooks on August 31st during the hours of 10 and 6 as well.
Thank you. Next question, how will my child be provided his service while only being in school 2 days a week? If he is pulled out, he will be missing valuable instructional time. And this question is for Mr. Florio.
So that's a great question. So that's been a common theme throughout a lot of the parent questions that we've been receiving. So, excuse me. So just like prior to COVID and prior to us leaving in March, services were provided to students in the classroom setting. And that's what we're looking to do this fall. So students who receive consultant teacher direct will be provided their consultant teacher direct services throughout their instructional day while they are in school. So this way we are not removing them from that setting to remove them from the instruction that's being provided. So what we're looking to do is ensure opportunities for instruction with students, with their peers, and not have to lose any of that instructional time. As you've heard from Mr. Stone, you've heard from Mrs. Sullivan, we're creating schedules right now, looking at ways for staff to be able to reach students during the school day from that 1 hour at the end of the day. So we're trying to be very creative in ways to address students with disabilities throughout the school day without missing their instruction, again, to the greatest extent possible as we follow New York State guidance.
Thank you. Next question, what should parents be doing to prepare their students for in-person school? Mrs. Goldberg?
Thanks for that question, Mr. Bowles, and good evening, families. We're so glad you're with us. That is really the key question. Even on a regular school year, children come to school with a lot of anxiety. It's first day jitters. And so it's very, very normal. And it's very normal in the time of COVID to have that even at a greater level. The biggest way to address that is to talk with your child. And when I say talk with your child, pick a time when there are no screens, when you can focus. Sometimes families find that best time to talk is when you're driving in the car somewhere. And to really focus on the conversation, and as parents, to listen. As a parent, it's really hard to listen sometimes when kids say things that even raise our anxiety. But you want to give them an opportunity to really put out there what they're feeling, ask those open-ended questions. How does that make you feel? What do you think about that? And then listen for the answer. And I had a parent reach out last week and say, you know, I just want to fix this for my son. And every parent feels that way. But this is a great opportunity to empower kids. So to ask them, you know, what do you think would help? Would it help to pack your backpack the night before? Do you want to check it again in the morning? So to really help the child develop some strategies for how to manage his or her own anxiety.
Thank you, Mrs. Goldberg. The next question, how will mask wearing be enforced? Mr. Keegan?
As we talked about earlier, kids are going to be required to wear masks at all time unless they're on a mask break. And so students and staff that are not wearing a mask, who have not provided valid documentation like a doctor's note, and we will allow, if a child has a medical condition, for that child not to wear a mask. But if they don't have the valid documentation, we're going to ask them to leave the premises. We can't have people just not wearing masks without doctor's permission.
The next question, will the children that are granted mask exemptions due to medical reasons be grouped into one classroom to separate them from children that are able to wear a mask, or will they be placed into the same room?
You know, it's likely that a limited number of medical exemptions will be granted for students attending in-person instruction, and therefore not enough, since it's going to be a limited number, to make up a full classroom at a grade level or a program at a particular building. So students without masks, due to medical exemptions, will be in a classroom with students wearing masks. I want to take this moment, though, to emphasize we're laying out our classrooms so that children will be socially distant at all times.
Our next question, will each student have access to a Chromebook? And if so, when will we be able to pick them up? What kind of supplies does each student need to have access to the remote learning?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I know that Mr. Stone's already answered a question about the Chromebooks, but every student in the North Syracuse Central School District K-12 will be provided a Chromebook at the start of the year. We're going to have some distribution before school starts, as well as distributing them the first day of school. Like he said, K-1 students, we're going to hold on to those Chromebooks a little bit longer for the first couple of weeks to get students acclimated with those programs, how to use it, take care of it. And then once the school year begins, those are going to be integral parts of our students' education in school and particularly outside of school. The other question that's come up quite a few times is, what about the resources my kids might have? Let's say I have a student who's going to be doing remote learning throughout the year, and there's a textbook or resources they have in school. Am I going to have access to those? And we're committed to making sure that whether you're getting an education remotely 100% of the time or in a hybrid model, everybody's going to have equal access to resources. So what we're going to do there is we're going to allow our students, of course, to come into the building at some point. Of course, the parents would work with the building principals to figure out what they need, and we would have it available to school from the pickup after hours or at a designated time. But we don't want our remote learners to feel as if they're not getting access to the resources students that attend school in person would have. And then as we work through the year, we'll work through some of those glitches, but we're expecting is that everybody will have access to all the same resources. We're going to have to get a little bit creative about how to pick those up. But the key part of the school year will be the Chromebook, because as we've mentioned last time, we have to be in a position, should it happen, for us to go 100% remote if we have to look at a school closure or something in that nature. So the Chromebooks are going to be integral. Everybody's going to have one. Our K-1 students are going to hold on to those a little bit longer to get acclimated. We will have pickups before school begins as well as the first day. If parents have a difficult time getting access to them, we'll work with you independently. And we're looking for some creative ways for maybe getting those out at the start of the school year. And then again, with resources, we're committed to equal access to all of our resources. And we may have to be working with our building administrators come after school or at a designated time to get access or pick those items.
Thank you. Our next question. How are you handling the influx of additional children at Lakeshore from Bear Road? Mr. Stone?
Yep, that's a great question. For those who don't know, Bear Road Elementary School is undergoing a major renovation. And so in order to accommodate that renovation, we had to move two sections out. So we moved 3rd and 4th grade out of Bear Road, and that is moved over into Lakeshore Road Elementary School. So to answer that question, it really doesn't change significantly what it actually looks like in school from a student perspective. That building at Lakeshore has the capacity to meet our needs. In fact, that building in the past for many years well exceeded the number of students that we're putting into that building this coming year. But in terms of safety and everything else, really, it's a numbers game with all of the requirements, and we're trying to keep the numbers. So we are keeping the numbers to what New York State education guidance has provided for us. So that includes that 6-foot distancing, all the things that we've already talked about. So when you walk into a classroom at Lakeshore, it's going to look no different from a classroom at Smith Road or Cicero L or any of the other buildings. You're going to see the desks spaced 6 feet apart. You're going to see the safety protocols put in place. And the reality is our elementary students are going to be remaining in the classroom for most of the school day. And so a lot of the services and everything else will be coming to the classroom. Lunch will be in the classroom. So when you really think about it, we look at it from a cohort model. We try to keep the students in one cohort, meaning like a class. So Mrs. Smith's class, we try to keep them together as much as possible. And that limits their exposure to others as well as them exposing other people. So as far as capacity goes and everything else, it's going to be pretty much the same as it is in all the other buildings. The only difference is obviously going to be those transitions, the busing time and everything else. And so we're going to stagger that appropriately so that we always maintain the distancing needed as we will in all the other buildings. But that arrival time and that dismissal time at Lakeshore probably will bump out a little bit further than it would be typically. But by doing so, we'll be able to accommodate all the safety requirements. So overall, it should look very similar to those other schools.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. The next question, what will a day look like at the elementary schools? Will they have recess? Are the teachers pushing into the classroom? This is for Mr. Stone.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about that the last time we met, but I think it warrants bringing back up. There were a lot of questions coming up again, and so I want to kind of go over what that day looks like. So if your last name in elementary is letters A through K, you'd be considered what's cohort A. If your last name is letters L through Z, you would be considered cohort B. And so cohort A students, for example, in the hybrid model, they would be coming in on Monday and Tuesday. And really what the beauty in this model, as far as all the models go when we looked at them, is they're getting a full elementary day. And that was one of the reasons that this model was chosen over some of the others. Let me just put out there that, and I'm sure everyone here would agree, none of these models are perfect. What we're trying to do is come up with the best possible scenario, given all the guidance that we have, trying to keep students safe. And there's a lot of factors that go into all of this. So looking at that elementary schedule, our students are going to arrive in that typical window around that 9 o'clock to 9:30 is typically when all students arrive, and we get some announcements going. As I mentioned last time, one of the things we're really going to be pushing is proper hand washing technique, so that we're going to actually be teaching that and practicing that at all levels in elementary. And so that morning chunk will be kids come in, they put their things away, wash their hands, and then we kind of get the day started. Now, what is nice about this schedule is that we're able to really maximize the instructional day when students are with us. So they're going to have an entire ELA block as they normally would. So they're getting their full ELA instruction Monday and Tuesday if you're cohort A. You're going to get your full math block like you would typically. Obviously, you're going to be getting a lunch. The lunch will be in the classrooms. And then we rotate social studies and science every other day in order to get those in. So they're going to be getting the full content time there as well. All students will be getting their special once a day on Monday and Tuesday, and we will rotate that special schedule. So it's not going to be like a typical school year like it isn't in any way right now, but they will get a special and it'll be on a rotation. So they may get art and phys ed the first week, the next week may be music and phys ed, and the next week maybe library and then art, and then it'll rotate through. So in a 5-week period, they will go through all of their specials, having seen music, art, and library twice, and PE they'll have seen 4 times in a 5-week rotation. And that'll be mostly in the classroom. We're still working on physical education and trying to make that happen so they have some space and be able to do that safely and get some activity. They will all obviously get recess, as we always do in the elementary schools. And we also were able to build in what we're calling a flex time. Because we've changed some of the things in the elementary schedule based on this new model right now and what we're facing, we were able to build in 40 more minutes into the schedule. And so what we're going to use that time for is that smaller time, one-to-one, where a teacher may be able to work with a student, be able to work on specific needs, really to differentiate, or use it however they see fit. A teacher may say, wow, I got the kids another 40 minutes. We're going to do another ELA lesson. We're going to read a story. We're going to answer some comprehension questions. Whatever they see fit. Maybe the students need a little bit more math that day. That creates a little bit more flexibility because, again, as I talked about earlier this morning, remember our teachers are teaching a full day with students, and then they're also working with the asynchronous students who are remote, and so they'll be looking at what's going on in that remote setting too. So we're really trying to maximize as much as possible. So that would be that Monday and Tuesday for that cohort A. Wednesday is a day we're really building in a lot of time for our teachers to have the time that they need in order to do this planning and with this model. Because with all these changes, with all the constraints put upon us, with all the limitations, our teachers are going to need time to collaborate and work together more so than ever in the past. So we're building in that time for our teachers. We're also going to have what Dr. Leahy spoke about with synchronous time. So all of our elementary students will get synchronous, meaning interactive lesson with the teacher. And we're working on those instructional guidelines right now. So that will happen for all students. And they will also, all students on Wednesday will be getting an asynchronous component as well. So like a Google Classroom type of thing that supports what has been taught or takes them on to that next level. On top of that, we do have a lot of computer programs that we've vetted and have used for the past several years, iRead being one of them. There's several out there, RazKids is another. So our students will have access to all of those. And what's nice about those is they can be very independent for students and they're very progressive. Meaning that as a student masters a certain level, that computer program kicks them up to that next instructional level. So they learn the new content in an appropriate manner that spirals in a way that teaches learning from the ground up. And so that will support everything we're able to do face-to-face, asynchronously, and in all the models we have. And then again on Thursday and Friday, that other cohort, letters L through Z, comes in for their Thursday and Friday instruction, while cohort A, that first group we talked about, is receiving their asynchronous, their Google Classroom type of situation. And that's kind of overall what an elementary day would look like.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Next question. You said there would be A, B, C, D days. How does that work in rotation? There are 4 days of instruction per week, so it seems every Monday is an A day, Tuesday is a B, etc. Meaning my child going on Fridays only ever gets his D class in person. Please explain how the rotation will work so that all classes will be in person at least once a month. And this is for Mrs. Sullivan.
Okay, so I'm going to throw a lot of dates and a lot of days at you right now just to show you how the rotation is going to work. So this is for all secondary buildings, the 2 middle schools, the junior high, and the high school. So Thursday, September 10th will be a B day. Friday, September 11th will be a C day. Monday, September 14th will be an A day. Tuesday, September 15th will be a B day. Thursday, September 17th will be a C day. And Friday, September 18th will be a D day. So that's like our first week and a half of instruction. Now the following Monday, in order for the students not to have an A day again, we've rotated it so that Monday starts on a B day. So Monday is a B day, Tuesday will be a C day, Thursday will be a D day, and Friday will be an A day. We are going to make sure that all students will receive a copy of the letter day calendar on their first day of school. The calendar will also be posted on our school websites and blasted out to parents. It's going to be very important that the students know what letter day it is before coming to school, so they know whether or not they have PE class or not, so that they know whether or not they need to bring their sneakers and whether or not they need to wear some comfortable clothes.
Thank you. Next question. Will 8th grade through 12th graders have live art and live technology classes the one day that they are in school? Mrs. Sullivan?
Yeah, so we've worked really, really hard on building up our elective program at the high school and at the junior high. So, you know, that's not something that we want to lose. So, you know, Ms. Taros and I have discussed that. And when students are in school for in-person learning and they're taking art and technology, students will be participating in actual activities for art and technology. The teachers will make sure that proper safety procedures will be followed. However, we want the students to be able to get a hands-on experience in those classes.
Thank you. Our next question. How will related services be provided? Mr. Florio?
Okay, so the related services will be provided in 2 different ways. So for those students who parents have elected the remote learning, those services will be through teletherapy. So what that will look like is just like we're doing right now. So the platform is going to look just like this. The related service provider will be in person through the computer. And that'll be for the speech, physical therapy, and occupational therapy. And that's how we will be doing our related services through remote learning. For those parents who've chosen the hybrid instructional model, for the students that will be in school on the 2-1-2 day or the 2 in 2 days, what that's going to look like is the related service providers will be coming into the classroom. As you've heard Mr. Stone talk about the cohorts and keeping the cohorts together. Our first round is going to be looking at how to provide those services in the classroom setting. If we cannot maintain social distancing, or if we have students who aren't able to wear masks, if we can't fulfill the requirements set forth by the Department of Health and Safety, then we will look at doing a pullout model and bringing students back into the therapy rooms. So again, we have the 2 different settings depending on whether a parent chooses remote or if the parent chooses the hybrid instructional model.
Thank you. Next question. Where are the parent resources that were discussed in the last session? Mrs. Goldberg?
I'm very excited to tell you about that. When you go to our website, you'll see there are a number of lines, and the top line says, and I wrote it down so that I could tell you exactly. The top line says COVID-19 resources, and you click on that, and then you will come to a page that has several blocks on it of blue, each of which, when you click on those blocks, takes you to various content areas. On the bottom right-hand side, there is a wellness block. And if you click on that, you will come to our wellness page. As you look at the page, the top left square says resources for parents. This is newly constructed, and it will be tweaked and modified as we gather more incredible resources. We're trying really hard not to overwhelm you and to curate the resources in ways that are really helpful. And one of the things we're planning to do is to archive the resources by month, so that if you saw something in September about the start of school, and we're into the rest of the school year, but you wanted to go back and refer to it, it will be right there for you. And we're trying to be comprehensive, everything from how to prepare your child to go to school, how to speak with your child about COVID-19. We're hearing a lot about trauma-sensitive schools, so what is meant by trauma. There's a wonderful video. No resource on the page should take you more than 5 minutes to either read or watch or listen to, so that it is not a large investment of your time, but a big takeaway. So check it out. And if you find something that you think is really useful, please email me and we can share it with the whole community. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Goldberg. Our next question, do the students and staff have to be COVID tested? And if so, how often will this be done? Mr. Keegan.
So there's been a lot of questions about COVID testing, and COVID testing is not required. That's not something that SED or the Department of Health is encouraging us to do as a prerequisite for students and staff to come to school. However, if a student does have symptoms or a staff member does have symptoms, the district will require them to be tested and to present us with a negative result prior to their returning to school. We will also work with, and I'm sure the community is aware, Onondaga County is trying to provide opportunities for our community to be tested, and they are offering the opportunity for testing to be done on our campuses. So we're going to cooperate with the county, and to the extent that students and staff want to be tested on a voluntary basis, we hope that they'll be able to do that through a county resource on one of our campuses.
Thank you. Dr. Leahy, will students receive the same level of instruction regardless of the model we choose? I would imagine that all students have the right to all curriculum regardless of the model.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a concern for some parents to feel that, as if, if my child's getting remote instruction, they're not going to step foot in the building necessarily to get their instruction. Can I assume the same level of interaction support they would get as if they were coming into the building? And the answer is absolutely yes. It's going to be a different form of instruction because the students won't be there. At the same time, we want it to be equitable. We want to make sure that all students in our North Syracuse community have access to an education. We're in a position where we know throughout the year, we may start in a hybrid, we may go to remote, full remote. And if things are encouraging, we may end up all be back in the buildings at some point this year. And we're all part of one learning community. And the path we take at this point is got to be a path that we feel that'll lead students to success as they make their way through the school year. I mean, we're committed to doing that. And again, we spent a lot of time last week, and parents were asking really great questions about what does the instruction look like? What will my kid expect? What will their daily schedule look like? And Mr. Stone has done a great job with his instructional operations committee along with Mr. London and a really dedicated group of teachers that have been looking at this since May and working through the fine details to make sure that we have a robust plan that we can support, that we have the resources to commit to. And I would encourage parents to look at those, because it wasn't just here's the middle school program, here's the junior high and the high school program, here's the elementary program, but they worked in a really smart way, which was let's do grade bands and let's make sure that K-4 addresses the needs of our elementary students. Let's make sure our 5 through 7 addresses the needs of our middle school students as well as our staffing. And then let's make sure 8 through 12 addresses the needs and the staffing of our junior high and high school students. What's really unique and one of the challenges we work through, they're working through, is that once you get to grade 7, you have individual certification areas. And I mentioned this in our last session, So it becomes a little bit more unique. If I'm a chemistry teacher, I'm not in a position to teach anything else beyond those courses. And that makes staffing a lot more challenging than it does in the K-6 where you have these generalist certifications. So we're looking through that. But I think what we'll find is that although we have some students be working remotely, some in a hybrid, there's a very good chance we'll all be doing one thing together at some point in the year. We're all one community, and then we're committed to creating an equitable environment for everybody as we move forward. And again, I would encourage parents to look at those model schedules and say, hey, how does it look remote vis-a-vis or in face-to-face with a hybrid schedule? And I think what you'll find is a similar amount of synchronous and asynchronous instruction. Those Wednesdays will operate very similarly. And my hope is that it'll be a balanced approach for all of our community and our learners.
Thank you. Our next question. Will there be kindergarten screenings prior to school starting? What about kindergarten orientation? Mr. Stone?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so for those of you that are out there with our youngest students coming into kindergarten, I know this has come up a couple of times. Typically, we in the past, we've always done what's called a kindergarten screening. And usually that happens toward the end of June or early July. And what that is that's a time where our teachers assess our incoming kindergarten students to see where they are emotionally, as far as their age development, where they are academically. And we look at multiple different components for each child. And there's really a pretty intensive, about 45 minutes worth of time with students. And what's nice about that is it gives us a good picture of each student coming in so that we can ensure we're placing students in balanced classrooms. We can ensure that if there's concerns from the get-go that we're getting eyes on students right away. Now, obviously, in this situation, we're in a very different situation. And so we've held off on kindergarten screening for several weeks now, and we've made the determination that the best course of action is we're going to build our class lists, and we've involved our principals as well as some of the staff in helping make this decision. But we're going to build our class lists to the best extent possible. Obviously, we're very limited because we've got those last name grade bands. We were building in time in the very beginning of school to do a kindergarten screening. And the reality is, as we really got talking about this, that kindergarten screening that we used to do in the summer, really when kids come into school, we're doing it very similar assessment a second time. And so we're kind of almost double dipping. We're also finding that the kindergarten assessment that we would do back in the summer typically did not yield the strongest results in order for us to build a balanced classroom. It was still a lot of guesswork. So we felt that given all of the safety things going on, given that these are our youngest students and all of the constraints we had throughout this summer and all that's evolved and kind of loosened to some degree, we felt it was best to get our students into school in a regular setting. And we will be doing those assessments. Remember, our classrooms are going to be very small. Most of the typical classrooms in the elementary are going to be 10, 12, maybe 14 students in them, whereas before we used to be 20, 22, 24, sometimes even 25. So we're going to have more time with students as well when they're in school. So teachers will be able to get those assessments done. And ultimately, the important thing is that we're learning where each student is to develop an individualized plan for them, along with the main plan in order to meet their differentiated needs. To answer your second question, you'd asked about kindergarten orientation, and I am happy to announce we will have kindergarten orientation at all of our buildings. We worked through several components to make that happen in a safe manner. So the elementary principals, in fact, we just met last week. We're meeting again tomorrow to kind of finalize some of those things. And we're going to be doing it in a way that's as safe as we can possibly make it, but also giving our students a real experience. So we're hoping to do it if the weather holds to kind of bring one class at a time to the school. So maybe Mrs. Smith's class would come at 10 o'clock on whatever day is assigned. The teachers would be there, the principal would be there. We hope to do this outside, which would be nice. We can use one of the spaces at the school, spread out our chairs so that we're socially distanced by family, do a nice presentation, still allow students into the building to get a tour of the classroom. They will be required, of course, to wear masks, but this will be a great time for them to kind of experience some of that. We're also still planning to get a couple of school buses on the property so that students can get an opportunity to learn about bus safety. And also, what do you do on that first day of school when you're standing at the bus stop and you've got your mask on and you're getting on the bus? So, all of those components we normally do, we're still going to be able to do. It's going to look a little bit different. Biggest difference is obviously the masks and reduced number of students in each of the areas. So we are able to accomplish that, and that schedule should be coming out very shortly in the next couple of days. Kindergarten parents will be getting information typically through email, through School Tool in our school system.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Next question. How will the flow in the hallways at the secondary level be arranged? Mrs. Sullivan?
So we've been working really hard with maintenance and operations to order a lot of arrows and footprints. So we'll be working hard over the next couple of weeks to put our arrows up in our hallways. We're working on having one-way hallways, one-way staircases. Our footprints are for our offices so that we don't have a lot of students standing in line behind each other. But you know, the students will all be wearing their masks in the hallway. And while the rooms are being cleaned, there will be no students or teachers in the rooms while they're being cleaned. Teachers will be out in the hallways with their students. And as soon as their rooms are cleaned, they can bring their students in and they can start class. So, you know, as long as everybody is all masked up, this should work very, very well. So we're just asking for that and to follow the arrows.
Okay, great. Thank you. My next question. Are we to fill out a free and reduced lunch application this year if our children are remote learning? Mr. Keegan?
The answer is yes, because we're going to be operating our school lunch program as if we're operating under normal conditions. Free and reduced eligible students will receive free meals, and other students will be expected to pay for meals, whether they're served in a school or at a grab and go pickup site around the district.
Great. Thank you very much. Mr. Keegan, the next question is for you as well. In the last session, we talked about arrival and dismissal times, and they'll follow social distancing guidelines. But how exactly will that be done? Are times going to be staggered, especially with kids being dropped off? How will social distancing be followed?
So at this time, we're not considering staggered arrival or dismissal times. And that's due to the fact we're bringing, half of the elementary school students back and a quarter of the secondary students back. We will, however, manage student drop-off and pickup in a manner that ensures social distancing can be maintained regardless of whether a student arrives by car or by bus. For example, cars are going to be greeted at the curb, and only after student temperatures are taken will the child be allowed to enter the school building. And we want the parents to stay until it's been determined that the child has a temperature that is lower than 100 degrees. And we're going to monitor the flow of students out of the vehicles and into the buildings very closely so that the adults can ensure that we're maintaining social distancing at all times.
Thank you. Next question. As parents of two students that excel in school and are asking to return, we're concerned about any differences that may exist in the level of instruction between part-time in-school learning and full-time remote learning before committing to one or the other. Will either or both provide a consistent teacher barring any unforeseen circumstances? Dr. Leahy?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's been a lot of questions about teachers. Our commitment is to provide, obviously, we're required to provide a certified teacher for all of our students. We don't see shifting staff around during the school year unless it's absolutely necessary. We value the relationships our teachers build with our students on the very first day of school. And we know, especially this year, it's going to be critical for our success as a learning community to build relationships between our teachers and our students and support that process. And so with that said, our intention is to keep staffing consistent as much as we always have. We're going to be developing our capacity to deliver instruction online, both for the hybrid model, our remote learners, and should we have to shut down. There's been some questions about what about honors? How is that going to look different? And parents should expect, yeah, the honors program should be very rigorous. Instruction should be challenging for students. It should be distinctive, as all our programs should be. And I think this time, we've had more time this summer to look closely at our instruction, our capabilities, our online platforms. And I think parents will be pleased as we move forward in this school year.
Thank you. Next question. In good weather conditions, will teachers be able to bring classes outdoors? Mr. Stone?
So absolutely, that's an easy answer one. They will be encouraged to be outside as much as possible. And that's, and I'm speaking for probably as many levels as possible, elementary especially. teachers will have the opportunity to bring their classes out. There's no reason that with the protocols, they can't have safety and outside and be able to actually teach from outside. In fact, some of our teachers do that on a regular basis when the weather is nice. We live in Syracuse. We want to take advantage of this nice weather as much as we possibly can. And hopefully fall is like the summer has been. And like I said, physical education, again, they're going to be highly encouraged to get those students outside in a safe manner. We can really social distance out there, get some exercise in. We'll be taking advantage of that as much as possible.
Thank you. Next question. Will students know what kind of mental help they can get at school and how to access it? Mrs. Goldberg.
That's a wonderful question. Thank you for sharing that. Our teachers and our mental health providers work hand in hand. And as I shared in our last meeting, we're really fortunate this year that we will have at least one consistent either school counselor or social worker in all of our elementary buildings, which is a first for us, in addition to having a school psychologist and an ADAPEP counselor. Lakeshore will have an additional 0.5 or half-time social worker to deal with the larger influx of students from Bear Road. So our teachers and our mental health professionals work together as a team. And teachers will be identifying kids that they feel might benefit from support from our mental health providers. And this might take the form of some counseling. It might take the form of a social skills group. And our mental health providers have already said that they would be willing to work with teachers in the classroom. If there are a need, for example, if there are a lot of students who are exhibiting a lot of anxiety, a lot of social anxiety about being in school, it might be a really opportune time for one of our clinicians to come in and talk about friends and how to make friends. A lot of our students have been in a pretty significant social isolation over these last 6 months. So it won't be uncommon for kids to have to literally learn how to do school again.
Okay, great. Thank you. Our next question, what is the quota for busload? Will students be allowed to ride home with friends? Mr. Keegan?
So I think we spoke in the last session, we're going to limit the seating on the bus to one child per seat. Our standard bus has 22 seats on it. We will allow family members or children that live in the same household to sit together. But that's going to be the maximum capacity on the buses is one per seat unless there's children from the same household. Regarding being able to go home and go to a friend's house, unfortunately this year we're not going to be issuing bus passes. So we will not, because of the limited capacity of the buses due to COVID-19, we're not going to be allowing children to travel home to another friend's house.
Okay, thank you. Next question, since most students get on the bus and touch every seat as they walk, who is cleaning them between pickups? Again, Mr. Keegan.
So a couple things. We're going to hopefully, as we orient our kids getting on the buses, we're going to try to encourage them to not touch every seat. It's hard. Any of us that have boarded a bus, I think I do that every time I board a bus. So we're going to try to encourage them not to touch every seat. But our drivers at the end of every run are going to go through the bus and wipe down all the frequently touched surfaces with a disinfectant. And then they're going to, at the end of the day, those buses are going to be thoroughly disinfected so that they're ready to go the next day. I should also mention, Dan, related to that, we're going to keep our bus windows when the temperatures are above 45. We're going to keep those bus windows down a little bit and the hatches up. Let some good airflow get into the buses as well, and that'll certainly help with the healthy environment on the school bus.
Thank you. Next question, how will remote services be provided? Mr. Florio?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so for the remote services, as I kind of alluded to a little bit earlier in a previous question, remote services are going to be provided for the through special education and a certified teacher through, like we were saying, through like a Zoom, this kind of method, and for our related services especially. So for related services, the remote services will definitely be through a teletherapy. The remote services will be through a certified teacher, and the special education teacher will also be attached so that services on the IEP will be provided to the greatest extent possible. So it definitely will be a little bit different than we had in the spring. We'll definitely have a certified teacher attached to that student for their instructional work.
Thank you. Will 8th through 12th graders have live gym class or only virtual gym class if they choose to go to school 1 day per week? Mrs. Sullivan?
So I touched on that a little bit in one of my previous answers. Students will go to actual PE class when they are here in person, and they're scheduled to do so based on the letter day that they're here. The PE staff has been working very hard on their curriculum to make sure the necessary modifications are in place in order to follow proper safety protocols. PE students, however, will not be changing for class. So students will need to make sure that they're wearing comfortable clothes and bring sneakers if they don't wear the sneakers so that they can change into them. When students are not in school, they will be doing an online portion on an online platform. And those teachers will be in touch with students about that.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have a few more minutes, so we'll try to make sure we get a few more questions in here. And question, how will things be handled if all or just groups of classes have to switch to all remote learning due to increase in community-wide cases or a positive COVID case within a class or group? How will more hands-on classes be handled if they have less or no time physically in classes? Dr. Leahy?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as I alluded to earlier, we're going to have to be ready to pivot quickly should we have a positive case within a classroom or a team of students, or if we have several in a school. So we're building a model. And again, this to credit to Mr. Stone, Mr. London, the Instructional Operations Committee, that can transition pretty quickly between hybrid and remote learning should we have to make an adjustment at some point in the school year. This school year, the key is it's going to be about flexibility. Everything we have to do is flexible. It's got to be flexible scheduling. It's got to be flexible staffing. We've got to be flexible with our mindsets entering the school year. We got to be flexible with our transportation. Flexibility is going to be critical throughout the year. And our teachers are working through that now. The other part of that question, which is a really interesting question and a challenge that we're working through, is, what about those hands-on activities that we would do in classroom, in a shop class, or in a science lab? How do we do that? Should we be in a remote learning environment at the outset of the school year or at some point throughout the school year? And I know that we're working now, a lot of our directors and our teachers looking at that. Can we do those hands-on activities virtually? Can we do online demonstrations? Can we have students do some portions of labs, if not all of them, at home if we modify them? Can we have students do some authentic projects and assessments where teachers can guide and coach online, and students can perform an operation or complete a project at home with the support of their teachers? So this is really, really challenging work, and it's really exciting work at the same time. And one of the resources we have is we're working with our BOCES program, and we're working with all of our component districts, because we're all in the same situation, learning from one another and saying, hey, how do we make sure that we're ready to pivot if we have to? How do we make sure we continue the instruction moving forward? And how do we make sure we don't lose some of the high value things that we do in our classes and throughout the school year? So those are great questions. And really, again, it comes back, and I've said it several times, but it comes down to this concept of flexibility and pushing forward, moving forward throughout the school year, being flexible, regrouping if we have to, and continue down that path to success.
Our final question of the evening, how will the schedule for preschool at the North Syracuse Early Education Program, how many days a week versus the UPK program? And Dr. Leahy?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now, NSEEP is looking at a 5-day schedule, and they may have some students attending a portion of that based on what program students register for. Our Learn As You Grow programs at South Bay on ELTA, as well as out in Cicero off of South Bay and ELTA, they're looking at doing a 2-1-2 and modeling their programming after the elementary schools. Northminster at this point is looking at 5 days. So as we register those students, if parents have questions, I would encourage them to contact those schools themselves and look at their scheduling options. They're all handling it a little bit differently because they all have different needs, different resources. Some of the programs are have more staffing than others. But if parents have questions about pre-K programming, I would really encourage them to call those buildings, call those schools, and have some conversation with the administrator there. I know Dawn Hussein, our NSEP principal, she's had lots of wonderful conversations with parents about devices, about support, about services, being flexible and accommodating questions as well as scheduling needs when possible. But probably the best bet would be to call those buildings themselves. We work to support those buildings, and we really value that pre-K experience, but those schools would have the best answers, the most updated answers in terms of what they're offering at this moment.
Thank you. Thank all the parents and people in the community that have joined us this evening. This will conclude our second information session. We will have one more tomorrow night from 6 to 7, looking at some questions that we have not answered. And I appreciate your time, and thank you, and have a wonderful evening.